Welcome to Oak City Church, a family of learners, lovers, and givers sent. For more information, visit us online at oakcitychurch.com. Let us know if we can help you in any way. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. Our scripture reading picks up directly from last week. It's Mark chapter 9, verses 14 to 29. As this starts and you see the word they, that is Jesus, Peter, James, and John. And when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all of the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. And he asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" And someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." And he answered them, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. And it has often cast him into the fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible for one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, "I believe, help my unbelief." And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer." This is the word of the Lord.
This is probably my favorite guy in the Bible. And I would say except for Jesus, but I'm not sure I would mean that. Like, I know that Jesus is going to be more than this guy, but at this moment, this guy seems more relatable to me. I don't know if you ever thought about, sometimes when I read the Bible, I think, I wonder if we're going to get to hang out with these people. Like, when we get to heaven, if we can make an appointment, you know? Like, I would like to hang out with Abraham for a while and just find out, like, reading that story through so many times, and there's so much to it. Like, I got questions, you know? Or Job. I would like to know when Job found out that the whole story was predicated on a bet between God and Satan about what Job would do. Like, I would think that would not be great. It would be an awkward conversation between me and Job, you know? And, but I wonder about it. And this is a guy that's like on the top of that list of, I just want to say thank you to this guy. I'm a bit of an overthinker. I don't think I'm as much of an overthinker as I used to be, but then I started thinking about that and realizing you're thinking so much about this that you probably still are, you know? And if you're an overthinker, doubt probably tends to be a little bit more of your story than it is for other people. Like, doubt is not a part of my wife's story. She just doesn't doubt stuff. For how many of you, like, doubt is a healthy part of your story? You think about this stuff a lot. And so this guy, in this passage, his ability to just kind of stand his ground with Jesus and come to him and be honest with him when it feels like being honest might not be the best tack to take in this situation, but to let the chips fall where they may. I just love this story. For 30 years, it's probably been one of my favorite stories. And you can be honest with the Lord, and God will be compassionate with you. That is the bottom line of it. So let me set the stage here. We're going through the book of Mark, passage by passage, and it says they came to the disciples. They saw a great crowd around them, and the scribes arguing with them. So when they came to the disciples as Jesus and Peter, James, and John, we just reached like the peak of the book of Mark, where Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah, the one they've been waiting for. And then Jesus starts talking about suffering, and that doesn't match with how they see the Messiah. So that's going to be a theme through the second half of the book on the way to the cross. And Jesus takes them up on the Mount of Transfiguration, where they see him in his glory, and the Lord speaks and says, yeah, this is the one, this is the Messiah. You were right, listen to him, even if what he's saying is hard. And they come back off that mountain, and the other disciples have been waiting for them. And while they're there, they get in this argument with the scribes. And so immediately all the crowd, when they saw Jesus, were greatly amazed. They ran up to Jesus, they greeted him, and he said, what are you guys arguing with them about? And someone from the crowd answered, Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So we're going to sit in this situation with this guy and his son, because it's awful. This would be awful. It throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, grinds his teeth, becomes rigid. It sounds like a seizure. He says, I asked your disciples to cast it out. And earlier he said he has a spirit that makes him mute. So he believes this is a spiritual thing that's going on. And I just want to throw this in here because I think it matters. I think it's easy for us to think, well, they were just naive and they thought everything was a spiritual thing. But there's this little verse in Matthew, and I mentioned this in a sermon a couple months ago with the demon-possessed guy and the Gerasenes, where this verse in Matthew says, So Jesus' fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and healed them. So they do have categories, and they have nuance, and they investigate this stuff. They don't just throw everything, into the devil did it category. Like, they've got ways to discern these things, and here he is discerned over a long period of time that what is happening with his son is a spiritual influence. So Jesus answered. This is interesting because the man is talking to him, but Jesus answers them, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? And expresses, at the end, he says, this can only come out by prayer. Like, there's some faith involved with this. And then he says, bring the boy to me. And they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw Jesus, immediately he convulsed the boy. The boy fell on the ground, rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And the father said, from childhood, and it has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. Like it's an intense scene. It doesn't get a lot worse than this. I had my old boss, pastor, I remember he had a line where he said, a parent is never much higher than their lowest child. And I think that is in a lot of ways true, that a parent is like emotionally tied to what's going on with their kid. I have some friends right now who have a child who's incarcerated. And my heart just, as soon as they told me that, is like, I got weighed down, and I know how weighed down they are. We had a family here years ago who real early, and they had a little girl named Maven, and then they ended up moving back home to Connecticut, and they called us a few years later and said, would you pray with us, because Maven has a form of brain cancer that's almost always fatal. And so for a year, we prayed with them, and then she ended up passing away. And I remember going to that, doing the funeral in Connecticut, and I can still see Paul and Melanie's face after the message. There was "Come to the Altar" was the song that they chose, and their arms were raised, and they were worshiping the Lord in the midst of that. And I'll never forget it because of the intensity of it, We had a family here years ago that they found out she was pregnant for the first time, got halfway through the pregnancy, and found out that their baby had like a liver condition that almost always resulted in the baby going to term and being born, but not being able to live outside the womb, and so passing within a few hours of birth. And And most people choose to abort the baby in that situation, and she chose not to, which I think was the right thing to do in her case. But sure enough, she carried the baby to term, and the baby died within a few hours. But as a church, we were trying to walk alongside them and pray with them in that intensity for 4 months. And as a pastor, I'm like, we got to stay somewhere tethered to them in that intensity for 4 months. And it's hard to do because it's hard to get when it's not your kid. And so this guy, whatever it is, it's trying to destroy my son, is desperate. It's not an off-the-cuff statement. It is the result of investigation and evaluation and trying to figure out what it is and what it's doing. And he's concluded it's trying to destroy my son. It has from childhood. So the kid's got some years on him. This has been happening for years. It has often, like on some regular basis, thrown him not just into the fire, but into the water. Like it will destroy him by any means necessary. It'd be like if you felt like there's some spiritual influence that causes your kid to walk out into traffic. That's what this guy's dealing with. It's repeatedly, over a long period of time, tried to destroy him by any means necessary. I don't know. How many of you ever felt like something is a threat to your children? If you have children, how many? Yeah, that's like every hand of someone that has children. And that could be illness. I remember when I was thinking about this when Claire Pritchett was real young, we ended up at Duke, and I don't know if John's in here. I can't even remember what it was for, but that was a threat to their baby girl, and it was all in. You get a threat like that, you'll drop everything, you'll sell everything. There was a woman in here years ago, she had a son who was severely autistic. She ended up selling everything and moving to Arkansas, I think it is, because there was a program there that might help her son. How many of you view the internet as a threat to your children? How many of you have some type of guardrails up, some type of filters on the internet? How many of you wish you had better filters? Yeah, all of us. We know there's craziness out there. There's good stuff out there, but there's craziness, and you want to protect them. You may have, at some point, your kid got a friend that you're like, I just don't like that kid. I don't think this is good. And so you try and figure out how to restrict that. It could be a bad teacher or a school or a coach. And if that's the case, you'll change teams. It could be some type of, a trauma or some type of a resulting mental health thing going on. When those things happen, everything stops. There's not much that's more panic-inducing than that. I thought this week about some of these. Over the last few years, you've seen these school board meetings where the ones in particular where there's some stuff in their kids' library that is just sexually explicit, and so they'll read the book in the school board meeting, and the school board will be like, oh, you can't read that here. It's like, that's the point. It's in my kid's library, They'll do anything. We'll do anything. And so my first point today is kind of tangential to the whole passage, but I think it matters, and I think it's biblical, and I've kind of been waiting for years for it to fit in a sermon. Satan wants to destroy your children. Satan wants to destroy your children. There was a whole message on this earlier, and so there's two ditches when you talk about the demonic, and one of it is to never talk about it at all, and the other one is just to obsess over it. And so we try and keep us in the middle of that, but I think we lean in this direction of not talking about it at all. So I do kind of look for opportunities to right-size it. And it's why I'm pausing. I was reading Job years ago, the book of Job, and the beginning of Job starts off with Satan being kind of in a meeting with the sons of God. This is a whole other thing, but and God says, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him. He's righteous in all the earth. And Satan's like, well, that's just because you've never let anything hard happen to him. You let hard stuff happen to him. He's going to curse you like the rest of them. And so Satan's like, you're on. Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So you can get the stuff around him, but not him. I got all sorts of questions about this, but one pastor said shows that evil is not God's idea, it's Satan's idea, but God puts the boundaries on it, and ultimately God gives Satan enough rope to hang himself, so that would draw us to the Lord. But what Satan chooses to do, I remember reading this years ago, I was like, wow, so he goes after his stuff first, but then quickly says, while he was yet speaking, there came another that said, your sons and daughters, to Job, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. So he's got like 10 kids. They're having a potluck at the oldest brother's house, and the parents weren't invited. My kids are planning a sibling vacation next summer, and we're not invited. And that's awesome. Like, there's nothing that makes me happier probably than the fact that my kids like each other, And that's what we've got. But what happens next is my worst nightmare. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. I'm going to tell my kids, you can take a sibling vacation together, but you got to travel in separate cars, because this is the scariest thing ever. And we went through this with that story about the demoniac and the Gerasenes. His problem is plausible. I mean, most people believe in good and evil. Most people believe in a spiritual force for good, but the numbers drop when you talk about a spiritual force for evil. And I think the devil loves that. It's perfectly plausible to believe in a spiritual force for evil that has influence. It's plausible. It's relatable. A lot of us have experienced interaction in some way that we can't explain, but it is in that realm, and it's fixable. Satan is limited in his power. He is not omnipresent. He is not omnipowerful. He's not all-powerful. He's not all-knowing. He's limited in his resources, and he deploys them strategically. And Jesus has already won that battle, so in the name of Jesus, we can pray against whatever he's doing, but take that seriously. So, we'll move on from that. This is the first point. Satan would destroy your family. So this guy, in the midst of this, going on for years, comes to Jesus, says, but if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And he, to me, sounds so tired and desperate. Like, I'll try everything. If you can do anything, please have compassion on us and help us. How many of you have prayed that prayer? If you can do anything, please do it. And in that, there's kind of the implicit gaps of his faith. So there's an interesting contrast between this guy and an earlier story in Mark where a leper comes to Jesus. Now that's an equally horrible situation. It's a skin disease that's super contagious, so you can't be around anybody. You are just out. You are completely isolated. And the leper comes to Jesus, imploring him, kneels before him and says, if you will, you can make me clean. So he's sure that Jesus has the power to help him. He's not sure if Jesus has the will to help him. And our guy here is pretty certain that he has the will to help him, but he starts with, if you can. He's not sure that Jesus has the power. Again, like this kind of two ditches. God is powerful, but he's not good, or God is good, but he's not powerful. And figuring out how those things mix together, you probably lean towards one side or the other. And there's a real tension in that, because if God is all powerful, then why doesn't he fix everything that he can fix? And we start questioning if he's good. It can be easier to believe that he's good and he wants to fix it, but then he's like, how can God not be powerful enough to fix it? And you probably lean one way or the other. Like, where do your doubts lie about God? The Bible says he's both. He's powerful and he's good. The problem is that his ways are higher than our ways, that we live in a fallen world, and he hasn't chosen to bring the kingdom in power right now. And he's got work that he's doing in the midst of that tension, but it can be hard to live in that tension. Whatever the tension is, wherever the gaps in your faith, this is the second point, you can be brutally honest with God. If you've been here for a minute, this is an evergreen point for me. I could make this point, I probably do make this point every week in some way, shape, or form in my sermons. You can be brutally honest with God. We've gone through a bit these last several months about like our core values as a church, what really matters to us. One of those is grace upon grace upon grace. And the idea that grace is like when you understand grace is God's done something for us that we couldn't do for ourselves, and he gives it to us freely through the work of Jesus. And you can understand that at a really basic level, like a second grade level, but God's got you on a PhD track because grace has to like seep down into every aspect of your being and every part of your life, and it's harder to accept it in certain parts than we think that it is. And so we're going to keep moving on that because that's the thing that's going to change us. And the second value is change takes time. It just doesn't happen overnight. We're complicated people with complicated problems that we've taken a lifetime to put together, or maybe generations of our family for sin to seep down in the way it does, or millennia of humanity for sin to affect us. And those problems aren't just going to go away like that. It's going to take time, and it's going to happen in the context of authentic relationships. And so we word that people grow best in sincere, open, honest relationships within a trusted community. We need authentic relationships. It used to be authentic friendships. We changed it to relationships because the number one relationship that has to be authentic is your relationship with God. We want this to be a safe place, and it starts with that relationship that needs to be the most authentic. And that can be hard, especially, ironically, in church. This can be the hardest place to be honest with the Lord. That's why almost every year we've done a series in August called Where is God When Life Happens, where a lot of those situations are just tough situations that have happened in people's lives that didn't make sense in the moment, or maybe don't even make sense now, or partly make sense. This is what happens most of the time, but some of it doesn't make sense. And it is a way of saying you don't have to have it all figured out, and you can be honest with God in the midst of it and not pretend that you do have it all figured out. The women's retreat this weekend was geared towards this. The parenting class has, become half parenting class and half support group, where people talking about the hard things. The thinking behind, we've talked about grace groups is geared at this. Our men's breakfasts have been geared towards this, just like making these places where we can be honest with the Lord. This is probably my favorite psalm, Psalm 62. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. You ever waited for God in silence? Is that hard or easy? It's pretty hard for me. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. That is like aspirational for me. On God rests my salvation and my glory, my mighty rock. My refuge is God. Like my safe place is God, but that's only true if you do the next part. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before the Lord. Just pour out your heart before him. God is safe for you. He is safe. There's an ancient prayer of examine in that the consolations and desolations, where they're just like, where is your soul being consoled by the Lord, where you're finding yourself in love with the Lord, but then the opposite, where in your soul are you disturbed and agitated, without hope, without love, and it's finding you're getting lazy and sad, and it's because you feel separated from God. Consolations, but also desolations. Earlier this year, I preached about prayer, and one of the analogies I use is my dad and I, whenever we get together, we'll go out and have breakfast. There's no agenda. It's just kind of whatever spills out, spills out. And it ends up being consolations and desolations. Here's what's going really well, and here's what's hard. My dad is kind of a counselor for me and an encourager for me. And that's what prayer's like, and that's what God is for us. And so this guy, if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. It's honest and maybe honest to the point where if I'm him, I don't expect a great answer when I give that prayer, but it's really honest. And Jesus says, and I think he says this with a grin on his face, if you can, I'm Jesus. If you can believe, I can heal your son. All things are possible for one who believes. I think this is so gentle. And I think that could raise the bar and feel like it raised the bar too high. It could be discouraging except for what happens next. There's something about honesty in relationships, in particular in your relationship with the Lord, where we might be holding something back, and when we're honest, it breaks us through to whatever the next level is. Like it opens the door for growth in our relationship with Him. And so God is able to point out, hey, I'm not the problem here. If you can, that's cute. I can. We've done it a lot. What about you? You know? It's like spiritual heart surgery. And I think that's true in all relationships. There are times where you're holding something back, and that's what's keeping you from moving forward. Like you're scared of what happens next if you say the hard thing, right? And that fear can be valid if you're dealing with a parent or with one of your children or a spouse, because they're not going to respond perfectly, and there may be more conflict. Well, it takes a while for things to get worked out, but with the Lord, like it's perfectly safe. And like this guy, often you have to get to a crisis point where you've got nothing left to lose. That's what it takes to get us to this place where we're going to go deeper within ourselves and be honest. And so immediately, the father of the child cried out and said, I do believe. It spills out of him. Help my unbelief. This guy was smart. He would have just stopped at I do believe, you know? Like, it's true. He does believe. You know, if he's just playing this whole thing, I do believe. What's a little half-truth between friends here? Like, you didn't ask for the whole thing. I do. Do you believe? I do believe. But it spills out of him. Help my unbelief. I do believe, but I don't believe. And this ends up that your faith is stronger than it is. And I think we do that a lot in church. We pretend we know and believe more than we do, and doubt becomes a dirty word. I have a friend I got to like 10, 11, 12, and I just had all these questions about all of it. And I'd ask my parents, and they wouldn't have the answers, so they called the pastor over on a Sunday night to his house, and he asked these questions to the pastor, and the pastor told him to stop asking questions. And he's like, that was it. I was done. And that is spiritual malpractice. It breaks my heart. And so I have worked, like with our youth group over the years, I try and get in once a year, and I might come when I'll be the one with the questions, you know? Because if you don't have a lot of questions about this stuff, you're not thinking hard enough about it. There's a lot of questions to be asked. How many of you know who Rhett and Link are? How many of you know that? How many of you know them because they were here? And how many of you know them because of YouTube? So these guys were here. I mean, when I moved down here 30 years ago, my roommates were on staff with Crew, and these guys were at State, and they emceed the big gathering. They're just super gifted, talented guys. They went on staff with Crew, did a bunch of video stuff, and then they ended up, I think somebody deconstructed their faith. They lost their faith. And I was like, no, I didn't. And so I listened to Rhett's thing. And they grew up south of here, about an hour, 45 minutes in Lillington or Bowie's Creek or something like that. And as I listened to him talk through like what his troubles were with it now, he ended up like pointing to this Wikipedia page on common descent. I went to it. It's like just a real quick one-page thing, and I'm like, wait, this is one card out, and the whole thing fell down. I heard a pastor say a couple years ago, don't let the unexplainable keep you from believing the undeniable. Don't let the unexplainable keep you from believing the undeniable. And I kind of feel like that's what's happened in their case. I don't know, because I don't know. Bible, it was not written as a science book. That's not the point of why it did it. And I have a lot of questions about a lot of stuff when it comes to that. But that is we can only explain this to some degree, and it's not the core of it. The core of it is the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus, and that is largely undeniable. Like Jesus lived. He lived a life so compelling that people that don't even believe he was divine are still talking about how great he was. The best, and people will deny that he rose from the dead, but they don't have a good explanation for what else could have happened. No one knows where the body went. None of the groups involved with that, the religious leaders, the political leaders, the disciples, had a good reason to hide the body. And even if they could, no one keeps a good secret. The best explanation for the lives of the disciples and the beginning of the church is that they believed Jesus actually rose from the dead. They didn't go around proclaiming the teachings of Jesus and re-preaching the Sermon on the Mount and saying, isn't this great teaching? They said over and over again, this guy rose from the dead. Like, that was their message. Death to life for him and now for us. Like, this is the resurrection and gave you the Spirit that raised him from the dead, because the power of that Spirit is the only thing that's going to change you. Every great moral teacher in the history of the world has said, be good, but they didn't give us the power to be good. Only Jesus did that. And there's no good explanation for all that. We walk by faith and not by sight, but it is largely undeniable. And so you can take trips out to the unexplainable, like day trips, and be like, oh, that's crazy. But you can always come back to the center of it, to the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Don't let the unexplainable get in the way of the undeniable. You do believe. But yeah, there are some things that you got questions about. That's fine. Lean into your faith because it's there and it's real. And you know what? Lean into your doubt because it's there and it's real. Like, find a safe place and safe people to talk to about it. Don't be scared of your doubt. The stuff that we're scared of, you can be brutally honest with them. You don't have to pretend with them. Faith is a great thing. Hebrews 11, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. By it, the people of old received their commendation. We should pray for more faith. Faith is a gift from God. You should always want more faith. I'm going to throw this passage from James in just because it's there and it doesn't really fit, and I don't even know what to do with it. You know what I mean? This would be unexplainable to me. But James says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, it'll be given. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea. But I know what happens next in this story, And I don't have to be able to square everything. Live out both of these things. I would say be bold about your faith and be bold about some doubt. Honestly, the people around you that aren't quite there yet, your kids need to hear you be bold about your doubts. I don't have to explain everything. I'm not God. I got to explain, I got to understand and have faith in the main things. We live in a world that increasingly wants everything black and white or red and blue, and purple's a problem. And we can put that out we don't have to hide it. We say this to get to the end of the story. Know that the power of faith isn't in the amount of your faith, but the object of your faith. And so this guy cries out, says, I do believe, help my unbelief. And now we've got like a tense moment. Jesus has a choice. He can say to the guy, well, take care of that unbelief and come back and we'll see what we can do. Or he can honor whatever belief the guy brings to Jesus and heal his son. How much faith is it going to take? And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. I don't think Jesus has a grin on his face anymore at this point. He has all the power. He rebukes the spirit. He commands the spirit. He says never again to the spirit. It's complete. He honors the guy's faith in the midst of his doubt. His faith is enough because Jesus is enough. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. In Matthew's version of the story, he adds this. He said, truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of a mustard seed, which was like the smallest of seeds, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. Which is to say, like, maybe we've got a lot less faith than we think we do. Maybe we're giving ourselves too much credit as it is. But Jesus is the object of our faith is the thing that's most important in this. And we bring him what we have. Let me put a caveat on this, because this can be a hard story, because, like I said, I bet most of us have prayed prayers like this that didn't get answered in the same way that this prayer got answered, or haven't gotten answered yet, or haven't gotten answered in the way that we wanted those prayers to be answered. And so I was listening to a message last week that I posted in the weekly, and the guy said, don't mistake the silence of God for the absence of God. Don't mistake the silence of God for the absence of God. And so this week I was reading a passage that made me think about people, and I'm going to give you a promise and give you a family and make you a nation. And I'm going to bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. All the families of the earth be blessed. And then he has to wait 25 years before he gets a kid, much less the land, much less just all the blessing. And in the middle, this is in the middle of that story. So this is a roller coaster of a thing. And it's right after his nephew gets in with the wrong people and he has to go fight some guys to rescue him, and it comes back and isn't time. And it says, Genesis 15, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. It's a hard time, has a vision from the Lord. See last week's message. But you think this is good. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. He's just been in battle. I'm your shield. I got your back. Your reward will be very great. Your reward will be great. This plan, it's working. Might not seem like it's working, but it's working, and I got you. And Abram says, O Lord God, which is like, I do believe, O Lord God, that he's going to be a family that's going to become a nation. He needs a kid to start with. He doesn't have it yet. And so Abram's like, I do believe, help my unbelief. Are you really going to help me? And then it says in verse 3, and Abram said. So God talks, Abram talks, and then Abram talks again. And just literally, that means there's a pause between verse 2 and 3. So Abram says, what are you going to give me? I don't have any kids. The heir is this guy from Damascus. And then he pauses because God doesn't say anything. Don't mistake God's silence for absence. And Abram repeats himself. Like, God, I don't know if you heard me the first time. Anybody ever pray that prayer? Behold, and he's more concise. You've given me, let me be clear about this. You've given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. Could be impatient, you know. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, this man will not be your heir. Your very own son will be your heir. You can be brutally honest with God. You bring the faith that you have. This is throughout the Bible. It's how God interacts with people. And he may not be doing what you want right then. But don't stop leaning into him. And I'm gonna point out one last thing. And it's that earlier, Jesus, in this passage, says, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? He says it to them, not to this guy. And it's hard to know what to do with that. It could be that with the disciples who couldn't cast this one out because they didn't have enough faith, or with the scribes who just don't believe in Jesus is who he says he is. He's like imploring them towards faith. But if you just listen to that, you'd think there's no way he's healing this guy's son. At the end of the day, Jesus responds to what this man brings him. He responds to the faith that he brings him. And I say that just to say God is not, that verse sounds a little like he's exhausted. He is not exhausted with you. Part of the beauty of Jesus in that story is that we can see individuals come to Jesus and think about us as individuals coming to Jesus because we come to Jesus as individuals. And he's not tired with you. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes for just a second and spend a moment with the Lord. I'm going to let you pray quietly instead of me ending this with pray. Because I'm praying, I don't know what your, if you can have compassion on me and help me is. Or what they are. Because you probably have a couple of them right now. The Lord about whatever that is. and bring it to him. Be honest with him. Don't pretend your faith is stronger than it is. Lean into your faith and your doubts. Ultimately, this isn't on you, it's on him. Put it on him. And take a minute to tell God, I do believe. Help my unbelief. There's no prayer in the Bible that I have prayed more than that prayer. I do believe. Help my unbelief. And let me say a word, if you are newish to all this stuff, your I do believe might be that undeniable core of I do believe in the life, the death, and the resurrection. I could not do for myself. And he rose from the dead, that I can have new life in him. And I want that. And I do believe that. But I have all these doubts. Well, if you have that, act on that. That's enough. And if you haven't come to a point of just saying, Jesus, I believe that you are the Lord, and I want to follow you, tell him that. It's that easy. And let us know, because we'd like to help you begin that relationship with him.